many technical issues, so we couldn't go live. However, we will be making up for the lost session by integrating some of those conversations over the next 3 days. So going virtual has opened many doors to reach even more aspiring and young entrepreneurs across the continent and really delve into topics that would have been very difficult for us to achieve over a 3-day live and in-person event. So over the next 12 months, I'm happy to announce that there will be webinars as well as mentoring sessions so that we can engage with you. In the meantime, over the next 3 days, we have fireside chats planned, in-depth panel discussions with thought leaders, global names in social investing and from the enterprise development world. So today I'm going to be hosting a session on gender and youth, and we've got incredible panelists that are going to be engaging with us and sharing their insights. So I'd like to thank the British Council as well as Ashoka Africa for coming together and partnering up for this very important summit so that we can try and propel the entrepreneurs on the ground in Africa. So please use our hashtag Impact Africa Summit 2021. We'd love to hear from you. We're across all social media platforms. So send us your thoughts, your ideas. We'd love to hear from you. And you can also use the chat box. Send us your questions. We're going to be opening up the floor for questions towards the end of this session. So we know that entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of the economy. From the woman selling goods in a rural town to an aspiring tech mind in a remote village and budding entrepreneurs in cities, Africa is made of the entrepreneurial spirit in every corner of the continent, crossing every sector. The summit is an opportunity to inspire, to support, to increase investment into social entrepreneurs. And it's also a platform for us to connect and propel the next generation of entrepreneurs into success. So this session will be on gender and youth, and though we know that the pandemic has reversed some of the gains made within these sectors over the past year, Africa remains one of the most exciting places in the world for youth, and women are making their mark as business leaders. Here are some of the numbers. 22% of Africa's working age population are starting businesses, and that's the highest number in the world, the highest rate in the world. And Africa's female entrepreneurship rate is also the highest in the world. So on that note, and as we think about those figures, I'd like to welcome Lucy Pearson. She is the country director for the British Council Nigeria, to give an opening welcome and introduction. Lucy, great to be with you.
Great to be here too, Eleni. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and the introduction. And to all our colleagues, participants on the call today, good afternoon, entrepreneurs, change makers, innovators and friends. My name is Lucy Pearson. I'm the country director based here in Lagos, Nigeria, director for the British Council Nigeria and director West Africa. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's session of Impact Africa Virtual Summit. This afternoon's focus, as Eleni has said, is on gender and youth, and we'll be exploring how the enterprise ecosystem can provide more support to young African women. And despite improvements in gender inclusion in the workplace across Africa, which have resulted in many African countries making significant progress towards gender equality in key aspects of society, gender inequality remains particularly high in Africa, though there's some great stories and some great figures, as Eleni has just touched on. But African women only account for 33% of the continent's GDP back in 2018, whilst we know that they account for more than 50% of the continent's population. So today's conversations, the keynote address, which we're looking forward to next, the fireside chats and the panel discussion will start to address the challenges, the opportunities around gender and youth and any deficit and how that gap can be plugged. A plethora of speakers today bring with them rich experience from their various expertise and practices that I have no doubt you will find valuable in your individual journeys. The keynote address, the fireside chat and the panel discussion this afternoon and across the next 2 days all promise to be educational, engaging and informative, and I'm delighted to welcome your participation this afternoon. Please do look up for coming events that are coming forward in the next few months and apply to participate in our tailored sessions, which will be open to 20 entrepreneurs every month until October 2021. And because of the technical issues we had this morning, recordings of the presentations and discussions will be made available on the website. which just leaves me to thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and hope you enjoy this afternoon's engaging sessions and the next 2 days of the Impact Africa Virtual Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Lucy. And I'm really honored to be introducing our keynote speaker today. We have Ifeyinwa Ugochukwu, the CEO of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. A little bit of background on just her incredible strides in her professional career. She's a lawyer and a passionate advocate of the transformative power of entrepreneurship as the key to economic development on the continent. Ifeyinwa joined the Tony Elumelu Foundation in 2017 as the Director of Partnerships and Evaluations. She developed the foundation's institutional framework for financial and value-add partnerships to scale the impact of the $100 million TEF entrepreneurship program beyond its initial target to empower 10,000 entrepreneurs. The resulting strategic partnership with governments, development finance institutions, multilaterals, and private organizations led to a record-breaking selection of over 3,000 entrepreneurs in 2019. She is an Afro-optimist. She is really engaged in what entrepreneurs are doing on the continent and here to help propel the continent as well. So Ifeyinwa, great to have you on. What an honor to see you again. I know you and I have had time together. We spent time together over the last few years, and it's incredible to see your journey. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Eleni. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, distinguished guests and all our viewers. It is an honor to be here today at the Impact Africa Social Entrepreneurship Summit. I would like to start by thanking the British Council and Ashoka Africa for creating this much needed platform for a most important discourse. And of course, thank you to our fabulous moderator, Eleni. As you said, Eleni, yes, we got together some years ago when events like this happened live, in South Africa, or wherever else in the world we were. How times have changed since then, from the good old days when we moved freely from country to country. Did we ever imagine a world where movement would be so restricted, such that traveling for a holiday, for a conference, or even a business trip could be considered illegal with a £5,000 fine? Well, that's what's going on in the UK right now. And I don't know about you, but if someone told me 18 months ago that this would be the case, I would throw my head back in peals of laughter and tell them that at best, that's a good script for a B-rated movie. But alas, here we are, March 2021, and this is our reality. This is our world. This is your world. So what does it mean to be a young African entrepreneur in these times? What does it mean to be a female African entrepreneur in these times? And what does it take to succeed in these times? That is the essence of why we are here today. As Eleni had said, the primary objective of the Impact Africa Social Entrepreneurship Summit, which will happen over the next 12 months, is to accelerate innovative solutions to Africa's most pressing challenges by inspiring, supporting, and connecting young African entrepreneurs to the entire ecosystem that is fast emerging on the continent, singularly committed and laser focused on your success. Just over 5 years ago, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, in what was then uncharted territory, put its money on African SMEs. Our founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu, bet $100 million on 10,000 African SMEs and their ability to transform the continent. The sheer need and the sheer demand for the work that we were doing led us to engage with partners. And right now we have partnered with the likes of the European Development, EU DevCo, Africa Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, to offer this opportunity to thousands more entrepreneurs. A recent World Bank study states that small and medium enterprises are the economic backbone of virtually every economy in the world. SMEs represent more than 95% of registered firms worldwide and account for more than 50% of jobs, contributing 35% of the GDP in many emerging markets. What's more, small businesses generate most of the new jobs and help diversify a country's economic base. They also promote innovative delivery of goods and services and can be a powerful force for integrating women and youth into the economic mainstream. Yet, despite all these benefits, World Bank studies show that small enterprises remain significantly underserved by financial institutions. Research indicates that the credit gap that formal SMEs confront is about $1 trillion. So whilst our $100 million investment is a mere 1% of what's actually needed, from a private individual, it is a massive vote of confidence in the African SME and a bold step in putting the spotlight on the missing middle, which is the majority of existing African entrepreneurs. This missing middle is our only lifeline on the African continent. With the Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program, we demonstrate firsthand the belief that empowering African entrepreneurs is the most important investment that we can impart on the continent. A burgeoning youth population, which in the next 50 years will make up 39% of the entire world's population. African youth entrepreneurship empowerment is not just a regional issue, but a global issue, which should be a top priority line item on the global agenda of all governments and institutions. This is particularly significant in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, where studies have shown that Africa is the epicenter of the economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. African countries, with many having a mono economy, have seen a sharp devaluation of currencies, supply chain disruptions, food insecurity, and growing inflation. As an African entrepreneur, especially as a woman, you are likely saying to yourself, why now? Why my turn? Why can't things just be normal again? I know, because I have a couple of teenagers at home who are faced with similar uncertainties, with endless online schooling, no sports, no prom, no travel, and in their minds, seemingly no future. I will tell you what I tell them. In challenging times such as these lies the greatest opportunities and the greatest possibilities for mind-blowing success. And all you have to do is to strive with all your strength to ensure that you have your mind in the right place. Strive for a shift in your mindset, and this will change your personal perception. Once you're able to shift your mindset, your perspective changes, and you immediately see the world in a completely different light. A fundamental mindset change is a precursor to total personal transformation. Out with the old and in with the new. Only in this state will you be able to identify the gold mine of opportunities that these challenging times hold for those courageous enough to take it. And there is none more courageous than the African female entrepreneur in these times. Africa's female entrepreneurship rate is the highest in the world. 27% of the female adult population is engaged in early stage entrepreneurial activity. This means African women are twice as likely to start a business as women anywhere in the world. Studies show that the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected female entrepreneurs because the proverbial saying of wearing many hats has never been more true with the work from home realities. This means that the average woman in today's world, oftentimes in the space of one working day, is teacher, cleaner, cook, 3 times a day, no less, driver, nurse, and of course, your full-time job or business. So now more than ever, the female entrepreneur needs to reach deep within her and connect with her inner Amazon. It will take grit, resilience, determination, foresight, and tenacity. The good news is that all these lie within reach on the inside, not on the outside. And like I have always said, there is no better time to be an African entrepreneur, because public sector and private sector stakeholders are completely committed to creating an enabling environment in order to ensure that African entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, get the training, the funding, and the policies that they need to create a success of their businesses, and to make sure that we catalyze the establishment and the growth of thriving African SMEs. Opportunities abound for entrepreneurs who have cleared the clutter and anxiety from their minds and have an eagle-eye focused approach to their success. At the Tony Elumelu Foundation, our application portal on tfconnect.com opened on the 1st of January 2021, and it closes in just 6 days on March 31st, 2021. We have seen applications from across all 54 African countries, not in the tens of thousands, but in the hundreds of thousands. And as I had mentioned earlier, one of our partners, the European Development DevCo, is committing 20 million euros to supporting female entrepreneurs across Africa. And so now is the time, because programs like this are scattered throughout the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, for instance, which came into force also January 1, 2021, is another classic example. It's a flagship project of Agenda 2063 of the African Union, Africa's own development vision. It offers African SMEs a unique opportunity for borderless trade, and our governments must now put in place the policies and the infrastructure framework needed to actualize this unique opportunity. In keeping with the times, at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, we too are shifting our mindset and changing the way we engage. Prior to COVID, we usually select 1,000 successful candidates from the hundreds of thousands of applications received, and they would go on to receive the training and the funding. However, in a bid to reach all genuine entrepreneurs who wish to seize the opportunities of the times, we have introduced a psychometric assessment into our selection algorithm, and will now be training up to 50 times the numbers of previous years, after which the top performers from the training will go on to a Pan-African virtual pitching competition, from which will then emerge the final recipients of the seed capital funding. This expanded engagement will create visibility, capacity building, and a platform for many who previously would have ended their journey only at the application stage. And so again, I can't say it enough, there is no better time than now to be an African entrepreneur. It is all hands on deck, private sector, public sector, development finance institutions. The impact of the coronavirus pandemic has shown us how interdependent we are and how fragile our current global systems and value chains remain. We need to work together to build resilient systems through a mutually beneficial partnership of equals. In closing, Africa is full of diverse opportunities and breathtaking potential. Yes, challenges do exist, but we also have an extremely high return on investment, cutting across all industries and regions, which means that investments in African SMEs is not only a moral obligation for the public sector and philanthropy such as ours, but most importantly, a savvy investment decision for private sector players. Our greatest asset, our greatest wealth is our people. If we put the people first, the wealth will follow. Let us cultivate creativity, passion, resilience, enterprise, excellence, and execution as a people and as a continent. Let us usher in a new golden age of Africa's rising SMEs, in whose hands the future of the world's global economy lies. Thank you.
Ifeyinwa, thank you so very much. I'm so touched, I'm so moved, and I'm sure that the entrepreneurs, the people that are listening, are clapping, because I Feel so very inspired by what you have said. And isn't it incredible? And I keep saying this, even during the toughest of times, it is the entrepreneurs on the continent in Africa that have the most resilience, that are adaptable, and that can just operate under the most extreme pressure with the very few resources, if you look at it comparatively speaking to other parts of the world. So thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And we get to continue this conversation because we're now going to be engaging in a fireside chat. We've got Garance Wates-Richards joining us right now. She is the CEO of AXA Emerging Customers. She's also the winner of 2020 Women in Insurance Award. And just to give you a bit of insight into what AXA Emerging Customers does, it's a business founded in 2016, and it aims to protect the underserved populations from low to middle income and emerging markets, and increasingly in mature markets as well. So welcome, Garance. Great to have you joining us for this fireside chat.
Thank you.
It's going to be a great conversation. So I have to start with this. I love the fact that we say it's a business, the word business, that helps protect underserved and vulnerable populations. How do you turn that into a business?
I love that question. You build a business plan.
Yeah.
So, which, you don't actually turn it into a business. You start with it being a business as an initial objective. I think the idea that is when you work for a big company, you make sure that people strongly understand, especially the CEO, that it is about key financial indicators. But on the face of it, but also maybe secretly, what you're doing is you're putting as many resources and time to make sure you're creating social impact. I have a particular weak spot, let's say, not only for women, that I've been trying to push as women entrepreneurs, but also to protect them when they come into difficult times, such as widowhood or divorce or that kind of thing, in particular in Africa, because I have to say that when I saw my other co-panelists, I thought I don't have much of a legitimacy to be talking to African women, young African women. My only legitimacy is I was born on the island of Goria, so I have a smaller legitimacy. If not, I'm not that knowledgeable, and they all know better than me, but maybe there are things that are in common right across the world. That, I think, back to your question, you make it a business because you turn it into a business because it has to start as a business. If not, you're reducing social impact. I'm really convinced if you don't mainstream when you're in a big company into the strat plan of every single CEO, then you're reducing your chances of creating social impact.
So Ifeyinwa, I'd like for you to jump in here. And, you were talking about the missing middle. And I was looking at, some of the data points about who runs the largest corporations in Africa. And it's still very much male CEOs with the big companies, when it's the banks or the conglomerates or, the big institutions, the big companies on the continent. Why do we still talk about the label of male-only roles and female-only roles? And the reality is on the continent, we still battle with a patriarchal system. What has your experience been when you look at the data points and you look at what you're experiencing on the ground?
Thank you, Eleni. I think that Africa is a society that is, fragmented. So from a cultural point of view, from a religious point of view, definitely those labels still exist. But when it comes to business and commerce and entrepreneurship, I think that women have completely torn those labels away. For instance, at the foundation, we have many female entrepreneurs that are doing, the most unlikely things. We have one of our entrepreneurs who owns an auto care, so she owns a mechanic workshop and is one of the best in Nigeria. And so that is just a classic example that when it comes to SMEs, it's about passion, it's about excellence, it's not about gender. And so what we need to do is to bridge the gap where the cultural and the religious realities on the ground are creating barriers to women entering into business. It's up to the policymakers and the private sector to have gender inclusivity as a primary quality in everything that they do. And so for us, we are constantly pushing at the Tony Elumelu Foundation to ensure that our applications are at least 40% female represented, we're pushing to get that to 50. It's still, we're not there yet.
Where's the 50? Surely.
Exactly. We have to get to 50. But we've made a lot of progress, but we still have some ways to go.
Well, I hope next time I speak to you, it's going to be 50 and maybe 50. So, Galans, because you work in low-income countries and emerging markets, is what Ifeyinwa mentioned about, the systems that you see on the ground. And it seems that where the most vulnerable communities exist, that is when women are most oppressed. How do we transcend these issues to give women, opportunity where they're getting paid the same, where they have the same economic prosperity, even under the burden of having a larger family role to play?
You ask questions that are too interesting, and I only have 1 minute. But I like that. I like. Can you tell me how you pronounce your first name again?
Eleni.
You, Eleni, and
Ifeyinwa.
I'm so bad with names, so apologies. It's a beautiful name. So I like the way you say missing middle. What I call them, this population that I'm trying to further protect, I call them those that are too poor to be rich and too rich to be poor. Because from an insurance point of view, when you're very poor, there is mandatory public insurance. I'm not saying it works well, but it does give you access to public hospitals, not the best, and to a certain amount. But there are people that are just above, that are actually extremely vulnerable and that no longer meet the criteria. To your point, I'm extremely convinced of two things. I think that the COVID crisis, I agree with my co-panelists that has hit Africa so hard. And the other problem I find is that we don't talk about it enough. And I'm not sure everybody realizes to the extent to which this is true, because I find, at least personally, that there haven't been as many statistics around African countries as to how much people have been hit. Yes, maybe there have been a few less deaths because the population is not as old, or the weather is warmer, or I don't know what. But ultimately, the economic livelihood has been hit so hard that if one thing, maybe one good thing for women in particular and youth in general that has come out, is that it has been a crash course on digital and health. Right? And I think that one of the ways to give women who are, to your point, what you're talking about is that they're time poor, right? They're the sandwich segment. As my co-panelist said, the cultures are different. And sometimes I wonder, I don't know Africa that well, even though I did live in Rwanda and in Nigeria a bit, but I don't know to what extent things have changed and it's become more of a unified, pushing towards being a unified, so to speak, continent across borders. And if there are ways of creating platforms amongst young women or that kind of thing. But I do think that digital inclusion is the key to solving the time poorness and the sandwich segment approach to things, because obviously for the obvious reasons, right? It's cost efficient, it's quick, it gives you access to so many things. And to me, it's not obviously it's not an end in itself, it's a means to an end, because digital inclusion, if you manage to go from access to usage, obviously, because we know there's an issue about that gap, it leads to health inclusion, it leads to financial inclusion, it leads to education inclusion. And in particular, insofar as health is concerned, I don't know if this is a direction you wanted the talk to take, but I think, I mean, the African friends I do have, young women, younger than me, they talk to me a lot about how sexual health is still very much a taboo. And I think sexual education for young African women is such a key to their independence. And if you drive, and one good thing of COVID is that, for example, it's pushed the cheap use of teleconsultation so much that now women who have a phone can access for very little money consultations, which gives them access to a doctor who will explain contraception, who will explain all of these elements that are a great, to me, blockage in terms of giving them the freedom to, even if they have their parents and their children and the community, to take control over their lives very much. So I don't want to focus only on that, but I do think women are the entry door to health and protection in their families. And if they take control of that, I think they will gain more freedom to do a lot more things.
You're offering us a very interesting global perspective. What would you say?
I didn't exactly answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. But I think you're giving us a global perspective. And I think that's what's really important here, because you come with this global expertise on what is happening in emerging markets. And we want to leverage that and want to draw on your experience. What would you say the biggest challenges are right now facing women, the vulnerable women around the world in emerging markets, in the places where you operate? What are you seeing as the biggest challenge?
Eleni, is that question for me?
Yeah.
Or for Grant? Yep. So go ahead. After you.
Because I want to, I almost feel like you want to give me an Africa-related answer, but I want you to draw on your global experience. What would you say the biggest challenge facing women globally is right this minute? What is the biggest issue? Because you mentioned sexual health, but what else are you seeing on the ground right this minute?
So maybe I'll let you answer on Africa, because you're very knowledgeable, I'm sure, about other countries also. I think the difficulty we have in answering you, Eleni, is also that I'm not sure one size fits all. I actually think that there isn't one global challenge that's number one for women across the world. I have seen in articles and people I speak with that sexual health is a key challenge for young women in Africa. I have seen slightly less of this in some other areas of the world, but it's always up there. I would say in countries like India or Indonesia, it's very much linked to religion. And it's very much linked actually to digital access again. I cannot tell you how much this COVID crisis has forced men or whoever it is who's in control to give access to the internet to a lot of women. And in terms of health, it is mind-blowing. For example, just to give you an example, and it's not only AXA, all insurers do this. A teleconsultation is 5 cents. Okay, and that includes follow-up care and care coordination. It means that women who have any kind of women-driven health problems, or for their children, or for their parents, they finally have access to somebody who can systematically give them an answer. Be it insurers or doctors or whatever it is, we are using artificial intelligence, like I cannot tell you, to be able to find an equilibrium between physical and digital, because we haven't been able to go to the women physically anymore, right? Because everybody was locked up. So we found this digital equilibrium by using artificial intelligence to create chatbots that do a first level of triage. A first level of triage enables us to reduce so massively the people who have a huge problem that we can actually pay attention to all of those that really need attention. And I'm sorry to focus so much on health, but I think the challenge is very much linked to health.
Thank you for that. And it's so much for us to build on with you, Ifeyinwa. And I want you to weigh in here, because I'm curious about the women, the female entrepreneurs that are coming and knocking on your door. Is it resonating at all on the tech front, on the health front? What are you seeing? And so much of what Garance has said, I mean, literally it has shaken me, because when you think about the most vulnerable woman, it's almost what we see on the continent as well, in remote areas. And it's up to us to find these solutions. And the budding entrepreneurs that are watching this, I mean, Garance gave so many ideas of the things we could be getting into to solve some of these very stark realities.
So I think from the African perspective, you have to start when she's much younger. And that is why the focus of a girl child is so important, because it starts with education. It starts with letting her know that she has infinite possibilities to be anything that she wants to be. And if we don't catch her young, then she is in bondage to the cultural barriers, religious barriers, and everything in her society and community that tells her that she is not enough and shouldn't strive for more. One of the challenges that we see that female entrepreneurs face on the continent is access to capital. And this is because of a historic cultural aversion for women owning property in Africa. I mean, in a lot of customs.
Thank you. It's still happening in many countries. There are property. Can you believe it? It's 2021.
Yeah, exactly. So if we can crack that, if we can bridge the finance gap so that women have as much access to finance as their male counterparts, we will see a complete explosion of entrepreneurship, because the woman is the heartbeat of the home. The woman, because of her children and her family, is ready to work all day and come into the house and work all night to make sure the home has what they need. But she needs to be empowered. She needs to have the capital. She needs to have the support to start her business.
And she's quite lonely. She's quite lonely.
Yes, exactly.
In
But if she's educated, she can never be lonely, because the knowledge and everything she needs resides within her, and she will create the environment that she needs.
You know, in insurance, women are the first ones that have come up with this incredible idea that we had never thought of before. In our focus groups, they said to us, and this is e-commerce platforms, small startups started by women across the world. And by the way, their main problem is linked to their back and neck problems, okay, because they're driving 24/7 an e-commerce platform. And their other problem is that their parents need to be in good health. If not, the parents will take care of the kids. If something happens to the parents, then. But what they said to us was unbelievably interesting. They said, I chose this type of entrepreneurial service because I could start it at home. My first point. My second point is, even if I grew my first 2, 3, 4 employees, I can put them in an extra room or in a small room in the corridor or what have you. And so it's easy. I don't have to spend a lot of money. And when we went to them to say, how can we protect you better? They said, I would like an insurance policy that covers my family, so my children and my parents and myself, but also my employees. And nobody had really thought of mixing the two, the professional life and the family life. And there's a report that came out, and I'm sorry, I'm going to show off for 1 second, but called She for Shield, where we looked in 2015 at how to better protect women across the world. And one really amazing element that came out is that in their answers, women had a very cyclical vision of life and men a very linear one. And so the way they looked at things, it was constantly coming in circles. Just, for example, a man will be, and it's great also, always looking for a better yield from his life insurance. A woman will say, does the yield I get today from the life insurance enable me to not be a burden later on when I'm retired? If yes, I don't have time to go and be competitive and get an extra 1%. And it leads me to my last point, which is what we called transitive trust. I think there's a strong element between women that's about transitive trust. A woman will trust another woman. If she recommends something to her, she will go for it basically without checking. And we saw this when we invited women clients to come to our agencies, and we said, come with a woman friend, and to see if they're protected as they need to be, if they get a divorce, if something happens. We said the same thing to men. All the women came with a woman friend. No man showed up. So there is transitive trust. It's not a reproaching. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying from a sort of, it's really transitive trust. It's circular. I think it's also linked to the fact that we are very time poor, so we don't really have time to double check.
We are so time poor.
But it's very important for entrepreneurs.
It is. We're running out of time, so I want to.
No, sorry.
No, no problem. But I just want to try and get through as many things as possible. You know, you were saying that, the way that the women are treated. So in terms of property rights, access to funding. Funny enough, data shows that women pay back better. We're more trustworthy, and especially the informal traders. But you know what, Ifeyinwa, I think about the woman that is selling eggs. I think about the woman that is selling the bread. And when I was in Rwanda recently, I saw a woman with a baby on her back, picking chilies, and she was getting paid half the amount of everyone else because she had to stop to breastfeed. How do we pull these women out of this scenario? Because their burden of looking after their families, it cannibalizes every opportunity. So when at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, when you guys are looking at these, these entrepreneurs that are growing, the risk is that they fall out of programs or of other opportunities because suddenly they have to take care of the home or children. How do we protect these women? How do we give women more opportunities?
It all boils down to economic empowerment. Because if she has that little extra cash to pay for a caregiver who will be there and support her, then she will not have to fall out. And that's why for us, that is absolutely critical. And what we're saying is we need to consolidate. We must not allow ourselves to have different pockets of activities going on, and we don't see that critical mass. We need to see that critical mass in the access to finance for women, because that is really the problem. They're hardworking. So two things: capacity building and training is what they need, because they need to work smarter, not harder. They are the hardest working demographic, the least paid. Women make up 80% of the workforce in Africa. They get paid less than 30% of the income and own less than 1% of the property. It doesn't make sense. So these are the things that, from a policy point of view, we need to, put in place laws that will allow women at all levels to own property, to stand for themselves. Only recently in Nigeria, the Supreme Court overturned a law that says that you need your husband's consent to get your international passport. Just 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
Just 2 years ago. Before that, you must get your husband's consent if you have been married. It doesn't matter if you're divorced. If you're divorced, sorry, go get his consent. So these are the things that, if we can overcome in Africa, and at the same time, pari passu, we're making sure that women have access to finance. So we need to be creative and innovative. The traditional financial institutions need themselves to be trained to know exactly how they can engage with the small and medium enterprise and even the micro enterprises. Because like you said, Eleni, studies show that 95% of women, if not 99% of women who take loans, pay back. And they say the 1% that don't pay back has stopped on their way to the bank by their husbands.
No, exactly. That's why most of the clients of microfinance institutions are women.
So exactly. And Garance, I want to come in here with the risk element, because you're in an insurance game and you guys are always looking at risk. That's really important, right?
Yeah, very exciting life. It's awesome.
Listen, I love looking at risk. How did you guys figure out the metrics around risk around women, specifically in the vulnerable communities? How does one do that? And how do the entrepreneurs listening to this think about what their risk profile is?
So two things. I think that's also, again, a great question, but very quickly. One point I wanted to make to conclude what my co-panelist said a minute ago is, when we interviewed the employees of entrepreneurial ventures, the women all said, we look to work to have women bosses, because they are the only ones who will understand when we have children and what we need. So just one point to make is that all of the SME startups that women entrepreneurs we interviewed, they had 90% women employees. So that's just one point. Back to your question, there are two things. One, I think what's really moving is that everything linked to credit and giving out loans is changing, in the sense that the traditional criteria that used to be applied to be able to take out a loan is moving, thanks to social media and thanks to the taking into account of behavioral aspects of things. So, for example, MFIs are starting to look at as to whether they can track on social media the number of likes, the behavioral components, how this person contributes to a community, how this person is valued by her community, and that creates points. And this is the first huge change that's taking place. It's very slow. But in terms of credit risk assessment and overall risk assessment, the data, as you say, shows us that women are less fraudulent, women will pay back more easily, and, well, more on time. And I just want to make a very quick point on that. And they're soi-disant less risk averse. That really annoys me, and the data doesn't say that's true. The reason why women fraud less and are stickier and more loyal clients is because they're time poor. And literally what we found out is that it's because they don't have time to fraud, and it's because they don't have time to change suppliers. Because I find it very, infantilizing to say that, women are so sweet and they don't fraud and they're so sticky and they never change their supplier and whatever it is. I just want to make that point. We have a lot of similarities, It's just that we're not given the same chances at the beginning. To finish, just one thing that I really, really want to say. To your question about how do you assess risk, it's also, I think, with regards to women, that you have to look at how to help them on the how and not on the what. Because what, they know exactly what they're doing. And we focused so far, I think, too much on the what in terms of risk assessment, and much less on the how, the actual journey of how we get them where they want to go.
Garance, thank you very much. Ifeyinwa, we lost you there for a second, but I would like for you to have the last word.
What I was saying.
Garance, you were fantastic. You know, what is the problem? We know what they are. Like how do we give, you know, how do we empower women? So Ifeyinwa, what are you planning to do? Tell me in the next year. And then I'm going to check in on you in a year's time.
So for us, we found a tried and tested model for empowering entrepreneurs. Everyone knows if you empower a woman, you empower a nation. Women suffer the most when they are poor. So what we need to see is women who are economically empowered across the African continent. And so what we've committed to do as a foundation is simply to scale the number of women on our platform. So I promise you 50%, and the next time we speak, we will be at 50%. Already right now with the European Development Organization, the European Union, we will be at 50% this year, but we want to make sure that every year going forward is 50 or more % women empowered across the African continent. Millions of women. Imagine 1 million women training, capacity building, and funding. Imagine.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. Thank you so much for your incredible insights and for the passion you have in everything you do. I really appreciate your time. Garance, Ifeyinwa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleni.
Soon. Okay.